So, Jared, I chat with a lot of parents who'll say, oh, the bullying's not as bad as when I was at school. When I was at school, I used to get belted up every day, but now it's really easy for them. You know, it's not like that. And yet, you and I sort of view it differently. We'd say that the bullying is not easier. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the number one difference between bullying now and bullying, say, 30 years ago when mums and dads were at school is that with the increased supervision and the increased OH&S rules at school, there is a lot less physical bullying perhaps now than there was then, but there is a lot more verbal, emotional type bullying. And this is the stuff that doesn't stop once you get home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. With the prevalence of social media these days, you can go home and be bullied, you know, from dawn until dusk. There's no relief. And the way that the gang mentality of bullying works up is that if you're on the social media, one person posts something on your page, says something nasty to you, all the other kids they pick up on that. So they feed on that sort of weakness. And it can be a really constant thing that turns into almost like an obsessiveness. So we know kids are checking their phones every 20 minutes to see if there's any updates or anything. If the only thing they're seeing on there is negative, it's just going to start a spiral. And for the kids who are doing this type of bullying, it can become relentless and toxic. There's that level of anonymity and protection that you get from being on the internet that you don't have in real life. These kids say some really, really nasty and horrible things. And so this sort of barrage that these kids are under is completely different to any sort of bullying that parents might have experienced when they were at school.
Yeah, you might have got beaten up at 3 o'clock, but you weren't dealing with that at 9 p.m. when you were trying to go to sleep. You know, you weren't checking your phone at midnight just to make sure that someone who calls himself Kenny Koala hasn't said that you're an idiot, you know. And the other thing is, when the words were spoken to you at school of, you know, what an idiot you were by the bully, that was spoken to you once. But now it's on social media. It's said once, but your son's probably read it 30 times. Every time he reads it, it's like he's hoping it'll somehow say something different, or it won't be quite as bad as he remembers. But every time he reads it, he's just damaging himself.
And he's not the only audience either, so it might be targeted to him, but he's perfectly aware that the other 300 people who are looking at this are all getting that opinion, so they can see that what's happening to it. It'd be really damaging to your self-confidence.
And then imagine if your mum or dad says, oh, in my day it was worse. You know, you're like, what would you know? And then you wonder why our kids switch off to us. You know, it's what they're dealing with is unprecedented. We've never dealt with it before until this decade. And it's just hard yards for them. So I guess it brings up the question of how they want to use their social media. You know, like if they want to use social media and they're in that victim mindset already, like you can't win that. So maybe your child needs you to cause that family to reduce their social media time. Maybe your child's unable to do it for themselves. So as our son goes from being a victim sort of mindset to, what's the next one again?
Survivor.
A survivor, having that sort of, oh, I survived mindset, to being a veteran and overcomer, someone who's a resource to help others. Hopefully they'll start to go, you know what, it's not healthy for me to spend 2 hours on the internet worrying about what people say about me. Like, who cares, you know? But in the short term, they're going to need your help. What are your thoughts on sort of how you go about doing that with your kids?
Well, we're not telling you that social media is a terrible thing and you should get your kids off it. It definitely has its uses. It's just about reinforcing what those uses are to your son and making sure that they're being used for that reason. So if they've got friends who've moved out of town, or they've got a pen pal from overseas, or they're keeping in touch with relatives, or even if it is just a social thing, then it's important to remind them that that's what they're using it for. But a social thing doesn't mean that you have to have all of these people on there that are saying nasty things to you, basically, and making your life a living hell. Okay, so you've got the power on there to block them, to delete them, to unfriend them, whatever the tool is. And it's just understanding what's the purpose of my son having social media, what is his presence like on there, and reinforcing that, because it is so easy to slip into negative habits when it comes to social media.
So true. So true. So we'll leave that up to you to do with him, but just remember that he probably can't do it on his own. He's going to need a hand, because you don't want your son being a slave to social media. You want social media to be serving what he wants, not him having to obey and serve and be fearful of social media.